Well, good morning, ladies, gentlemen, members, and welcome to today's meeting of the Development Regulation Committee.
Still got the door open back here.
We're going to leave that
Well,
one.
yeah,
It's quite hot.
Okay, before I open the formal part of the meeting, I have a few housekeeping points I need to read out. This room does have automatic cameras and sound tracking on the ceiling with microphones above. Given this, I would like to remind members of a couple of things. Please continue to speak clearly and try not to whisper. Try and keep other sounds to a minimum, such as whispering, shuffling papers and typing loudly on the keyboard will be picked up by the camera and that might bring the camera onto you. Also bear in mind that the ceiling microphones are very sensitive and may pick up conversation in the room, including informal remarks. And finally, please refrain from using a mobile phone, as when the camera zooms, not only capture the speaker, but also that whoever sitting next to them. The last 2 points are particularly important as we are live streaming the meeting today on YouTube, and the recording of that will be available at any time on that channel. We're not expecting a fire drill this morning, so if the alarm should sound, please follow officers out of the doors, the side there and behind me, and leave the building by the nearest fire exit, which will be down the stairs in the foyer and into Duke Street, where you make your way in the location assembly point in the grounds of the cathedral opposite. Thank you very much indeed. Now we go to agenda item 1, which is the election of a vice chairman. Councillor Jowers is receiving treatment and he would be absent for the next 3 months. So I do propose to Councillor Lynette Bowyer-Flynn be elected vice chairman until Councillor Jowers returns. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gardner, thank you very much. Everyone's in favour of that? Yep. That's passed. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Agenda item 2, memberships, apology, substitutions and declaration of interest.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillor Jowers, for whom Councillor Grundy is substituting, from Councillor Harris, for whom Councillor McGurran is substituting, from Councillor Stevenson, for whom Councillor Pond is substituting, and also from Councillor Aspinall. That's very good. And it's just worth mentioning that Councillor Steptoe has had to pop out of the room because he's in a different meeting, but I'll come back as soon as that's finished. Do we have any declaration of interests? Councillor Mackenzie first.
I've been lobbied on 6.1 for the Loughton Library.
Okay, and have you discussed it with the monitoring officer whether you should still?
Literally, someone just said they thought it was a good idea.
Okay. Have you had any active part into?
No.
Okay, that's fine.
I didn't even know about it until it came up on the agenda.
That's very good. Thanks very much for that. Councillor Thorogood.
Yes, because RAC is on the agenda, my son goes to a school affected by RAC, but it is a trust school, an academy school, so it's not an LEA.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I have discussed it with Jacqueline and it's okay for me to stay.
That's noted. Thank you very much. Councillor Pond.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I was surprised that you announced that I was substituting for Councillor Stevenson, because after discussions with you and with the monitoring officer, I've taken the advice that it would not be sensible for me to substitute at this occasion. So I'm here only as a local member speaking on the library application. I want to just declare an interest in relation to the Loughton Library application, which is in my register of interests, is that I'm an honorary fellow of the Chartered Institute of Librarians and Information Professionals.
That's all taken and noted. Thank you.
I will go and resume a seat.
In the back in the gallery. Yeah. Thanks so much indeed, Councillor Pond. Anyone else? No, that's good. That's all. Thank you very much. Item 3 is the minutes, and members, you'll have noticed that there's a couple of minor adjustments in red that's been circulated on page 7, I think, and page 6. 11, 13, yeah, that was the different page in the the agenda. So with those alterations, are you happy for me to sign them as a true record?
Would it be right if we hand over to Claire just to get?
Claire, would you like to go through the alterations?
Yes, as the chairman was explaining that after committee, the officer looked at the conditions and felt that the wording wasn't quite as specific as you would like it to be. It referred to certain things not being able to take place while they were at ground level, and she's changed that now to damp-proof membrane to make it more specific. So there are 3 conditions that it impacts, which is condition 6, 8 and 14. So you'll just see in the minutes that it's in red. It's a minor change, but it just means in terms of enforcement, it's a lot easier to be specific when ground level can mean lots of different things, whereas damp-proof membrane is much more specific.
And for those of you who attended the training this week, it's very timely because the advice was the condition must be precise, and that's really what we've done. Are you all okay with that, members?
Agreed.
Thank you very much, thank you. Item 4 is public speaking. Emma?
Thank you, Chairman. For item 5.1 Lufkin's Farm, we have Mr. George Wright and Mr. Simon Tracy, speaking as joint applicants for the application. For item 6.1 Loughton Library, we have Mr. David Linnell on behalf of Loughton Residents Association Plans Group, speaking against the application. Ms. Emma Walker on behalf of the applicant, speaking for the application, and Councillor Chris Pond, who's the local member. And we also have Councillor Mark Durham, who will be reading out a statement on behalf of him.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Durham is the cabinet member who's responsible for libraries, and he would have been here today, but he's double booked. So therefore, I've allowed him for a statement to be read by Emma when the time comes. Okay, so we go to agenda item 5, mineral and waste. 5.1 Lufkin Farm, grape handling, freighting. That's in the hand of Claire Tomlin.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, go ahead now. Yes, this is an application, as the chairman said, at Lufkin's Farm in Tendring, just north of Durrington and south of Freighting. There is an addendum item to this, addendums to this item, and I'll refer to them appropriately as we go along. The site is southeast of Colchester. The application is for sand and gravel, creating a second irrigation reservoir adjacent to one currently under construction. So planning permission was granted for an irrigation reservoir previously on the site in 2010, but following a subsequent application was actually not implemented until 2019. The sand and gravel from that extraction is currently processed at Alresford Creek, which is a quarry to the southwest. As I said, the site is about 5 miles southeast of Colchester and about 1.5 kilometres south of Freighting. The application is the existing reservoir in the north, which is here. See my cursor moving. And a new reservoir to the south, which is referred to as Reservoir 2. The southern part of the site is currently in agricultural use, and the full site extent of the site extends to 22 hectares. There are 3 main elements to the proposal. The first is to change the phasing and restoration of the existing reservoir, which is still under construction, which is this area in the north here. And then to construct a new irrigation reservoir in this area to the south. And as part of that, to create a new processing plant area in the centre of the site. The planning application area extends across both the existing and the proposed reservoir, so that this planning permission would be a consolidating permission, bringing the 2 together, and would be the one permission that would control the site. Changes to the current reservoir which is the one in the north here, is rather than the reservoir extending further to the east, they would actually create a silt lagoon in the east side of the site. And this would be used to deal with the silt arising from the processing plant. So Reservoir 1 would be slightly smaller upon restoration. It's anticipated that the existing Reservoir 1 would take about another 18 months to complete, such that it's completed around July 2025. The second reservoir, Reservoir 2, would generate about 1 million tonnes of sand and gravel, creating a void of about 900,000 cubic metres. But this would actually only give rise to about 480,000 cubic metres of reservoir. This is largely due to the fact that there will be areas at the bottom of the reservoir which are dead storage, gradients on the side of the reservoir itself, and also other contingencies such as evaporation. The majority of the sand, subsoil and topsoil would remain on site, and excavated clay from the site would be used to line the reservoir. And as I say, a processing plant would be established in the middle. The intention is that sand and gravel from Reservoir 2 would 70% of the material would be processed at the site itself, with the remaining 30 still exported down to Alresford Creek processing plant, where it would be used to feed an existing concrete batching plant. The proposed hours of operation are Monday to Friday, 7 till 6, and Saturday, 7 till 1, with no working on bank and public holidays, and access would remain onto Bentley Road, Great Bentley Road to the west. As I said, it would take about 18 months to finish the first reservoir and a further 9 years to complete Reservoir 2. This is the proposed restoration scheme. So we have the two separate reservoirs with shallow areas created to the east of Reservoir 1 and in the old plant area for Reservoir 2. There'll be various woodland planting around the edge of the site as part of the landscaping, and actually hedgerow planting around the edge of the site would actually take place if planning permission was granted as soon as possible. As I've explained, this would be a consolidating permission such that existing permissions would be superseded if granted. In terms of consultation, we had no objection from technical consultees, although most consultees did require conditions in order to address issues and impacts arising from the development. We have received an objection from both Freighting Parish Council and Alresford Parish Council. Freighting raised concern with respect to the need for the extraction, the need for the agricultural reservoir, and the likely environmental impacts arising from the development, including noise, loss of agricultural land, and in particular, the impact of HGV traffic through Freighting Village. Alresford have similarly raised concerns about HGV traffic, which would still be required to go to Alresford Creek concrete batching plant. In terms of representations, we've had 6 letters of representations raised similar concerns to those of the parishes, mainly concerned about the impact of HGVs, justification for the mineral extraction, the impact of HGV traffic on air quality, impact on adjacent or nearby listed buildings, and concern about the actual supply of water to the that would supply the reservoir, and also impact of noise and dust from the new plant. So turning to appraisal of the development, the principle of the development, well, as you will see within the report, it is intended to create an agricultural reservoir, and sometimes these can be constructed under permitted developments, but when they involve mineral extraction, then planning permission is required. Proposed second reservoir is not allocated in the Minerals Local Plan, and therefore the Minerals Local Plan seeks to ensure a steady supply of sand and gravel. However, as set out in the report, as at the end of 2022, the mineral land bank was not below the 7 years required, and therefore there is no need on land bank justification for additional mineral extraction. Therefore, the application has to be considered against Policy 6 of the Minerals Local Plan, which seeks to limit extraction of sand and gravel unless there's an overriding justification or overriding benefit for the proposed extraction, and that the extraction should be the minimum to achieve the proposed after use, and that it complies with other policies of the Minerals Local Plan in terms of its environmental suitability and sustainability. In this case, the justification is to provide an irrigation reservoir for agriculture. The application was supported by an agricultural justification report, which has been reviewed independently by an agricultural consultant on behalf of the County Council. The report demonstrates that under the proposed cropping regime, more water would be required and it would be a more profitable farm, and it is considered that this is amounts to an overriding justification and benefit. The scale of the mineral extraction and void to be created has been shown to be warranted in order to deliver the quantity of irrigation water required, that being 480,000 cubic metres, particularly when various factors are taken into account, such as evaporation and dead storage. The water that would be used to fill the reservoirs comes from abstraction points, but they would only be allowed to be extracted in the winter. And the water would be used across 5 different farms, not just the applicant's farm, and this was secured through agreement. In terms of loss of agricultural land, the second reservoir would be located on land which is considered to be best and most versatile land. Consideration was given to whether the reservoir could be located on land that wasn't best and most versatile, but that would mean locating the reservoir well away from the abstraction points, which causes practical difficulties and costs in terms of piping between the two. It is considered that the loss of best and most valuable agricultural land is justified on the basis that the agricultural land that would be able to utilise irrigation water would give greater production. In terms of water environment, the mineral extraction would result in dewatering while the extraction and construction phase is taking place, but the impact on groundwater has been assessed to be only localised up to about 140 metres, and upon completion, groundwater would likely flow around the clay-lined reservoir such that impact would subside. The only extraction likely to be impacted during extraction and constructions are those of the applicant, and they have signed a waiver with the Environment Agency during the construction period. Risk contamination of groundwater was also considered, but if best practice is followed in terms of processing plant, then it is unlikely there'd be any contamination of groundwater. Surface water would be managed within the quarry and stored in the site to remove any silt, and then discharged to the Bentley Brick, for which there is already an existing discharge consent. In terms of transport and highways, the proposals are to use the same access and the vehicle movements to remain the same. So at the moment, the current Reservoir 1, there are 60 movements a day, 30 movements in and 30 movements out. It's proposed that these would continue while they complete Reservoir 1 and also while constructing Reservoir 2. As I say, at the current time, mineral from Reservoir 1 is taken to Alresford Creek for processing. The proposal includes a plant. So therefore, on completion of Reservoir 1, when the plant is in place, about 70% of the sand and gravel will be able to be processed at the site itself, and only 30% will be taken down to Alresford Creek. Of course, obviously, the development will result in traffic movements. Those going directly from the site, those associated with Reservoir 1 will result in movements going down to Alresford Creek Quarry. Unfortunately, there was an arrangement such that there would be a one-way system, so that there was a one-way system, so that some of the lorries going to Alresford Creek would actually go up and back down to avoid all the lorries going through Alresford. But unfortunately, due to the closure weight restrictions placed on the 2 rail bridges due to structural issues, now unfortunately traffic going from the site to Alresford Creek does have to go through the village of Alresford, which is unfortunate. But it would only be 30% of the traffic when the Reservoir 2 is being extracted. In terms of traffic going from Reservoir 2, it would be required to go up through Freighting Green and either out on the A133 to Clacton or up to the A120, either to go north to Harwich or west towards Colchester. Both parish councils have obviously raised concern about the HGV traffic. Freighting would prefer didn't have a processing plant on the site, so they all had to go through Alresford. And Alresford would prefer it didn't have to go to Alresford Creek Quarry, so they all went through Freighting. Obviously, unfortunately, neither of those situations can be resolved. But it is felt that the route from Reservoir 1 to the creek is a route that's currently used and acceptable in highway terms. And the route through Freighting Green is to the A133 and then onto the A120, so that is also considered a suitable route for HGV traffic. The Highways Authority have raised no objection. So in terms of highways and traffic, it's not considered that the application planning permission could be withheld on highways grounds. In terms of landscape and visual impact, some landscape impact would occur during the operation, and this would be minimised by screening bunds. And funny enough, it actually mainly the screening bunds that would actually impact the landscape, but obviously they would ensure that the movements on the site and noise and dust are controlled within the site. So they are a necessary part of the development. The plant is proposed to be 2 metres below natural ground level to minimise its visual impact. And as I mentioned earlier, new hedgerow planting on the perimeter site would be carried out as soon as possible after commencement. Upon restoration, the landscape input is considered to be negligible landscape impact. In terms of air quality, the application was submitted with an air quality assessment, and subject to best practice, no significant impact on air quality was considered. Concern has been raised by residents as to the impact of emissions from HGV traffic, but the assessment concluded that the number of lorries involved would not have a significant impact on air quality in view of the existing traffic on the roads, and therefore the county's air quality consultant raised no objection. In terms of noise, there was a noise assessment, and this has demonstrated that operations could be carried out within acceptable noise limits, and conditions could be imposed, setting maximum noise limits and requiring noise monitoring during the life of the site, such that the county's noise consultant had no objection to the application. In terms of ecology, the site is not subject to any national or local designations, and the nearest local designations are 1 kilometre away. The restoration protocols do include hedge and tree planting, and the reservoir would provide a water body with surrounding shallows and areas of reed bed that give rise to improved biodiversity. In terms of impacts on ecology, these could be minimised and mitigated through conditions. There is likely to be 2 skylark breeding territories, and off-site skylark plots could be required and secured through a legal agreement. In terms of cultural heritage, it's been assessed that there is likely to be a less than substantial harm to the nearby listed buildings during extraction and construction, mainly, as I've mentioned earlier, from the proposed screening bunds themselves. However, there is limited visibility between the listed buildings and the site, and the impacts would only be temporary, and the impact upon completion was considered to be assessed as negligible. Archaeological investigations would be required prior to operations in the plant area and reservoir 2, and these could be secured in addition. So in conclusion, the mineral extraction is based on the agricultural need to create an irrigation reservoir. It is considered, has been demonstrated that there is an overriding justification and overriding benefit for the agricultural irrigation reservoir using water available in winter only. It is considered the impacts arising can be controlled through conditions and legal obligations. On balance, it's considered acceptable when considered against national and local planning policy. And therefore, the recommendation is for approval, subject to the amendments set out in the addendum. You'll note in the addendum there are existing Section 106 obligations that require that the landowner shares the water with farms that are set out within the agricultural justification report, and that obligation is being carried through to a new Section 106. An additional obligation is added, which is for the provision of skylark plots. There are a number of corrections in the addendum to conditions. Having gone through them all, we felt that there were some improvements to those conditions, but they'll make them more specific. So I apologise for the number of minor changes, but they are minor changes. They don't change the thrust of the conditions. One additional condition has been added because it wasn't clear that we do expect that the processing plant needs to be in place prior to the mineral that needs to be processed in reservoir 2 being needing to be processed. So we've added an additional condition that requires that processing plant is operational prior to the need to process mineral within reservoir 2. So those are all set out within the addendum.
Thank you very much indeed, Claire. I'm call on Mr. George Wright and Mr. Simon Tracy to come and speak on the application. As you've been advised, you've got 3 minutes combined. So I don't know which one of you is going to start first. but 30 seconds, Emma will give you a prompt to wrap up. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is George Wright. I'm a joint applicant. We farmed at Brook Farm and Lufkins Farm for over 80 years. We appreciate that tendering area is one of the driest parts of the UK, and soils within the area are responsive to irrigation. With water can grow vegetables such as potatoes, onions, carrots and salad crops. Without water, the land is limited to cereal production. In order to capture water, which during the winter flows out to sea, we've built a number of reservoirs to store surplus winter water, which in turn reduces localised flooding. We use this to irrigate crops during the spring and summer growing season. This reduces the need to extract water from the aquifer and rivers in the summer when it's in short supply and vital for the environment. Working with other farmers, we've linked reservoirs and farms by a pipeline and expanded the operations over the years. The application before you today is to seek permission to build a second reservoir at Lufkins Farm, which will enable us to store more water and increase our ability to grow higher margin vegetables, which not only sustains our farming businesses, but enables other local farms that would be restricted to cereal growing options the opportunity of growing more specialist water-reliant crops. This in turn contributes to the need for the UK to grow its own produce. Water gives the advantage of both measured yields and crop quality. For example, potatoes without water can suffer from skin problems like common scab. Produce appearance has become an important priority for consumers, and water content controls appearance, size, yield and flavour, and therefore has become an essential tool in modern farming practice. To deliver the reservoir, we've engaged with Brett Aggregates, and Simon Tracy has joined us this morning to provide some logistical details.
Thank you.
So Brett proposes to invest in the erection of a processing plant on site, as this will generate a road miles saving. Processed products direct to market rather than being hauled to Alresford for processing and then onward sale. This is encouraged by policy DM3 of the Minerals Local Plan, which states that permission will be granted for minerals extraction where the processing plant is located on site. Brett is committed to self-regulation and the audit of its operations.
30 seconds.
The company's ISO 14001 environmental management scheme results in strict compliance with regulatory obligations such as planning permissions. We have had no complaints at the existing Lufkin site since operations began. We note from the officer's report that GO Essex would wish to visit the site, and I can confirm that Brett would welcome them to visit the new excavation as often as they wish. Thank you very much. We're happy to take any questions should you have any.
Thank you very much indeed. Unfortunately, that's not the protocol. If you'd like to make your way back to the gallery, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have any? Okay, members, I'll open it up for discussion, debate. Councillor Grundy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. With all the comments about HGVs from the two parish councils, which I can understand and appreciate, I was wondering whether the developer, i.e. Brett, would engage with those two parish councils on a regular basis to understand and appreciate and take their comments on board during the commencement of all construction work. We've had the experience in my division of that have been very helpful with regular meetings with the local parish council, and it is something that might just help those two parish councils to have a regular, reasonably regular, maybe 2 monthly, 3 monthly meeting to discuss ongoing problems.
Very good suggestion. Thank you, Councillor Grundy. Claire, did you want to comment on that?
I'm not the case officer for, but I believe that there has always been certainly liaison between Alresford Parish Council and Brett. So I'm sure that that could be extended to freighting and if necessary, even a liaison group established so that there's regular contact throughout the day.
Thank you. Councillor Otherwell.
Let me, oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
sorry.
I might catch that. So a point of, I mean, I can't see any problem with this at all. Just a point of clarification. You talked about best and most versatile land, whereas the report talks about mainly 3A and part 3B. It's only good quality, so it's not hugely productive land. And the provision of the reservoir, of course, will improve the productivity of all the land in the surrounds. And then coming back to the traffic, I've just worked out it's one lorry every 10 minutes. So I don't see that as being too onerous on any of the villages. So I'm fully in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Arthway. Councillor Garnett.
Sorry, can I just point clarification? I might have missed it in your presentation. You've got the blue routes coming out and going into the workings. Does that mean, are they banned going through Great Bentley?
Let me just
Claire.
go back to sharing the screen. So Great Bentley, yeah, I mean, that's not, that doesn't use a sort of A and B road, so that would not be an appropriate use for HGVs to go on. So the logical route is to go up to Freighting Green and then out on the A133 either to Clacton or north up to the A120. I mean, you can't have route agreement that bans them from going that, but logically that is the route they would use because they are the appropriate roads.
Yeah, but logically, drivers get in behind the cab, they go the shortest route they can get to. So is there anything we can put on that that stops them turning left?
As I say, routing agreements are something that's actually very hard to enforce. You know, you can't stop someone using the public highway.
Yeah.
So I think it would be unlikely that they would want to go that route, but it's very difficult for us to actually physically, put in place measures that would enforce that we could stop them.
Okay, perhaps, sorry, if we can couple it with Councillor Grundy's
There's an informative,
meeting. If we do start getting lorries going through Great Bentley, that something has to be put in place to.
Great Bentley Road, not Great Bentley Village.
Yeah.
It's Great Bentley Road.
Well, they go out onto Great Bentley Road. I think councillors concerned they're going to go down and actually go through Great Bentley and go. So if they want to go to Clacton, they might go east that way rather than going up to the A133. I think that's what you're
It would
concerned
be
about.
too long a route.
Yeah, it would.
It would be too long a route.
Yeah, look at it, it would do, but
You never know.
knowing my own area, they take the shortest route sometimes. It's, although we put weight limits on it, they still ignore them. Thank you.
Don't have any other speakers. Councillor Balflin, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry. I did get the nod from the applicants that they do already consult, so that does already happen on a regular basis. And obviously it's in their interest to talk to the parishes on a regular basis and perhaps give the parish council a contact number so that if there is an individual problem that they can do that. Also, I mean, I agree, it wouldn't make any sense whatsoever to go to Great Bentley, but living in a village where there are restrictions put on HGVs that they shouldn't turn right into the village, they should only turn left to get straight onto the A120, never ever happens. It causes so many problems, and as the officer has said, it's so difficult to police. It's almost impossible. So it's a waste of time putting them on, to be honest with you, because people will just do, unfortunately, what they want to do when they get behind the wheel. So if there isn't anybody else, Chairman, I'm quite happy to move officers regularly.
Thank you for that. Do I have a second for that? Councillor Arthway. And before I go to vote, I'd just like for the record that it is my division. I've had no involvement in the application at all, so that's I will abstain from the vote. I'll now go to the vote. All those in favour, please show.
With the amendments on the addendum.
With the amendments as for the addendum.
Amendments on the addendum. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any against? And I abstain on that.
I think councillor Stepka
Councillor Stepka, he wasn't there, that's right, yeah. So if we could communicate that to the applicant,
Yes,
that'd be great. So the application is granted. Thank you very much indeed, members. We now go to agenda item 6, Essex County Council Development, 6.1 Loughton Library, Cathedral in Loughton. That's in the hand of Mr Tom McCarthy.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. This application relates to an area of land measuring approximately 0.25 hectares and which is currently occupied by a building predominantly used as a public library. The site is located on Trapps Hill in Loughton, to the east of a road that provides access to Trapps Hill Public Car Park and Loughton Leisure Centre. The library building is here, the leisure centre, and then the public car park, Trapps Hill, and then High Road. To the west of the site is St Edmund of Canterbury Catholic Church, and to the east of the site, beyond an area of open space incorporating a child's play area, is Loughton Surgery. Further east are residential properties. To the north, on the other side of Trapps Hill, is Loughton Cricket Club and Bowling Club. And with regards to designations, the site is not located within a conservation area, albeit York Hill Conservation Area commences on the northwestern side of the cricket pitch, the Kings Green High Road York Hill Junction. So that's this junction with the conservation area going up to the north. The nearest listed building to the site is number 2 Trapps Hill on the corner junction of Trapps Hill and High Road. And the site is approximately 300 metres as the crow flies from Epping Forest and the southern edge of the special area of conservation boundary. So you can just make out Epping Forest to the north. Turning to the existing building on site, this is a part 3-storey building. The building was constructed in the late 60s, early 70s, although has been adapted, modified more recently. Trapps Hill slopes east to west toward Loughton Town Centre, and the existing building is constructed into the slope, such that it's set below ground on its eastern side, the point closest to the adjacent public open space and child's play area. And the car park to the rear, the public car park, is also set on higher ground. I will talk members through some photos of the site as existing to give you an idea of the site and the locality. So this photo is taken looking west or down Trapps Hill. So just out of shot to the left would be Loughton Surgery. You can see the open space and child's play area and then the existing library building. Slightly further down Trapps Hill, looking towards the existing northern elevation of the building and the existing access from Trapps Hill, vehicular access from Trapps Hill. Again, further down Trapps Hill, but this time east, so back up to Trapps Hill, away from the high road. In the shot, you can just see the electric substation, existing substation on site, and the public bins which line the access road. Just, yeah. The access road to the public car park and the leisure centre. The public bin store and public toilet again visible on the left-hand side of the photo, with the leisure centre building in the background. It's the leisure centre. This photo is taken on the access road just before the roundabout in front of the leisure centre building, looking east back towards the library building. You can see the bins and the toilet again. On the corner of the building, so looking around the existing southern elevation of the building towards the library entrance, if you take note of I think it says library open sign, this will help you orientate you in terms of the next sign. So that sign is in this picture, and this photo is showing the existing entrance to the library.
The tree in the photo is a category A oak tree, which is within the red line of the application. And then to complete the loop, this is the eastern elevation of the building. This photo is taken looking north, so the cricket ground in the background. You can see the level change and how the building is lower than the Trapps Hill level and the car parking area to the rear. Just to assist in terms of the existing character of the surrounding buildings, this is the Trapps Hill facing elevation of the leisure centre. This is Loughton Surgery, so the building the closest building to the east of the site. And then this is St Edmund of Canterbury Catholic Church to the west of the site. The application before members seeks planning permission to demolish the existing building and construct a Part 5, Part 4, Part 3-storey building to provide a public library, space for offices, community use, and the National Jazz Archives, and the provision of 38 residential apartments. All residential apartments would be for private ownership with no affordable provision. Initially, in respect to this, a viability assessment was submitted with the application, and this has been reviewed by an independent consultant appointed by the council. This independent review ratified the no affordable offer, largely agreeing with the costing and viability put forward by the applicant, albeit with minor difference in overall deficit, 4.9 million in comparison to 5.1 million. Moving on to the building proposed as part of this application, this would form a rough U shape and comprise 5 floors, including the ground floor and an additional basement car park. In terms of the use of each floor, the rationale is relatively simple in that the library and ancillary uses are proposed on the ground floor, with the residential uses then proposed above. The proposed ground floor, as shown on the screen, would predominantly comprise library space. That's the yellow shading. However, on the ground floor would also be space for the town council, the light blue shading, which is this part of the building, and National Jazz Archive, which is the purple shading. In addition to this, there is also community space, the darker blue, meeting rooms, which is the slightly lighter primary blue shading, and then public staff facilities, which are predominantly the red and orange in the eastern corner of the building. The main entrance to the library is proposed from the south of the courtyard area, which would be created by the building shape. So the library entrance would be here. The main residential core would be on the western side of the building. And this core would provide access to all the residential levels via a stairwell and a lift. To support this, there is also 2 secondary staircases proposed off of the courtyard. Turning to the layout of the floors above, as previously suggested, these would solely comprise residential units. On the first floor would be 12 units, on the second floor would be another 12 units, on the third floor would be 8 units, and then on the fourth floor would be 6 units. The flats within the western part of the building would be accessed via the central corridor off of the entrance core, with the flats along the northern projection, the projection facing out onto Trapps Hill, and the flats on the eastern part of the building accessed via an open deck. At basement level, car parking is proposed for the residential units, which would be accessed via Trapps Hill. 37 car parking spaces would be provided, 1 space being allocated to each residential unit, with the exception of 1 no parking provision. At the basement level would also be various plant rooms supporting the development, together with a sprinkler water tank store. The development is proposed with flat roofs, which would be covered in solar panels, with the exception of an area which is proposed to house the plant and equipment associated with the air source heat pump system. As shown on the elevations, the building is proposed to be constructed in brick with a ribbon of glass wrapping around the building at ground floor library level. The use of 2 types of brick, a darker variant on the top floor and on the east elevation with some render, is proposed to break up the mass of the building. The proposed mass of the building has also attempted to be broken up through a step building form and recessed top floor. The applicant has sought to suggest the proposed scale and massing of the building responds in this sense to its context, in that the lowest part of the building to the east, adjacent to the open space and more residential property scale development along Trapps Hill, and then the tallest part of the building on the northwest corner, providing the building with landmark or wayfinding characteristics from High Road to the west. At 5-storey, this development would be significantly larger than that which exists in the street scene, and concern has been raised as part of representations received about the visual impact of the development in the locality. The photo montages on the screen produced by the applicant seek to show the site from 2 key views. One from the uplands, looking at the site from across the cricket pitch, and one from the High Road junction, looking east up Trapps Hill. The photo montages show existing winter view at the top, and then winter view and summer view with the building in situ. The massing of this proposal has been developed through pre-application discussions with the council. And the proposed step nature of the building is considered does help to reduce the mass of the development. However, reservations have been raised by Epping Forest District Council with regard to the 5 storeys on the northwest corner. It is accepted by Epping Forest District Council that given the civic nature of the building, there is an argument that increased height could be justified. However, Epping remain concerned as to the extent of the building's visibility and as such its impact on the existing local character. Summaries of all of the consultation responses received are provided in section 4 of the report before you, with a summary of the 96 letters of public representation objection, also detailed in section 5 and appendix 1. To confirm, objections have been received from Epping Forest District Council, Loughton Town Council and the local member for the division. Harm to the York Hill Conservation Area has also been identified by the council's historic building consultant, albeit it is suggested that this harm would be at the lowest end of less than substantial. The appraisal section of the report, pages 82 through to 104, seek to provide commentary on what are considered to be the key issues arising from this proposal. Initially, with regard to this and the principal development, this site is allocated for redevelopment within the Epping Forest District local plan. The allocation, reference LOU.R7, outlines a proposed residential development with an indicative net density of 81 dwellings per hectare, or 20 dwellings overall. The allocation details that the proposal must also incorporate an on-site replacement for the library building at ground level. In addition, the proposal should incorporate suitable accommodation for Loughton Town Council. In context of the allocation within the local plan, it is not considered that a land use objection exists to a mixed-use development coming forward on this site. The proposals as put forward furthermore maintain a library use and would also provide accommodation for the Loughton Town Council as required by the policy. The proposals nevertheless seek 18 more residential units, 38 in total in comparison to the indicative figure of 20 suggested in the local plan. At 38 units and a density equivalent of 152 dwellings per hectare, this would be a high density development. As outlined in the MPPF, there is, however, a need to ensure the optimal use of land, and this is considered a highly sustainable location. Accordingly, the development density is not in isolation a reason to outright refuse planning permission. It is considered that without prejudice, should planning permission be granted, this development would likely become a landmark building. However, the assessment of the proposal has not sought to identify or suggest that the building is poorly designed, such that as such a building, it would be unduly harmful to its surroundings. Turning to car park provision, this application proposes a total of 37 car parking spaces in a basement, which would solely be for use by the residential development. No parking is proposed for library staff, deliveries or visitors, with it suggested that these demands would be catered for in the adjacent public pay and display car park. The parking provision proposed for the residential accommodation represents an under provision in terms of the adopted car parking standards. That said, as noted within policy LOU R7 and suggested previously, this site is a highly sustainable location with good transport accessibility. The Highway Authority has raised no objection to the development from a parking provision perspective. In respect of sustainability, the development includes a number of energy saving efficiency measures such as mechanical ventilation, heat recovery units, air source heat pumps, solar panels and electric vehicle charging points. You'll be noted that concerns have nevertheless been raised as part of some of the representations received as to the overall sustainability credentials of the development. Given a building is being demolished and accordingly there is embodied carbon and energy within this. This is not denied, but I do not have a calculation to suggest when or even if the new building through its energy performance would save the amount of carbon and or energy lost as a result of the development of demolition, sorry. That said, as required by policy DM21 of the local plan, the applicant has sought to confirm that sustainable construction practices will be followed where possible, with preference given to the use of sustainable materials and measures to minimise construction waste going to landfill. Lastly, and moving slightly away from the proposal itself, members will note that the report contains a section on Epping Forest Special Area of Conservation, and as competent authority in respect to the conservation of habitats and species regulations 2017, the council's appropriate assessment of this proposal. As confirmed in the report, an appropriate assessment has been undertaken in view that it's considered that the proposal has the potential to impact Epping Forest SAC in relation to added recreational pressure and added atmospheric pollution. The council have followed the approach which has been adopted by Epping Forest District Council with regard to determining applications which have this potential. In respect of recreational pressures, Epping Forest District Council have adopted a tiered level of financial contribution to offset additional recreational pressures from all developments, resulting in net increases in new dwellings within a 6.2 kilometre radius of Epping Forest SAC. In addition to this, a separate contribution per dwelling is required to contribute towards the implementation of the Roding Valley Recreational Ground Public Rights of Way Infrastructure Enhancement Project. In terms of atmospheric pollution, this is an allocated site within the local plan, such that the 20 residential units have already been assessed as part of the habitat regulation assessment, appropriate assessment undertaken to support the local plan adoption. If this application had just been for 20 units, it's considered a financial contribution in line with the interim air pollution mitigation strategy could have simply been sought. This application, however, seeks 38 units, so an additional 18 to that assessed as part of the local plan assessment. The assessment of additional traffic generation from these 18 units, as submitted by the applicant, is however accepted by the council. In respect to this, subject to the mitigation measures proposed, namely a financial contribution in accordance with the interim air pollution mitigation strategy, that 17 of the parking spaces proposed would be for ULEV vehicles parking only. 50% of the, or a minimum of 10 of the other car parking spaces proposed would have an EV charging provision, cycle parking facilities being provided, a sustainable travel welcome pack being provided, and a staff travel plan. The council is satisfied that additional atmospheric pollution resulting from this development would not adversely impact the integrity of the forest and or the designation. To therefore conclude, whilst this proposal seeks to redevelop the site at a greater scale than existing and introduce new land uses, the residential, it is clear from the Essex Future Library Services strategy that Essex County Council as applicant is principally looking to make the most efficient use of council buildings and land to ensure the viability of services such as libraries going forward. This site is allocated within the Epping Forest local plan for redevelopment, and whilst it is accepted that the development proposes a far higher density to the allocation, the government has a strategic objective to significantly boost the supply of homes and promotes a significant uplift in the average density of residential development in city and town centre locations such as this. It's considered that the proposals would result in a change in character to the site, given the increased height of the new building. However, it is considered that the design rationale has acknowledged this and has sought to reduce the perceived mass of the building with a stepped form and the application of the external materials, fenestration and landscaping to positively contribute to the street scene and locality. It is not considered that the development will result in unacceptable impacts to highway safety and or efficiency subject to the imposition of appropriate conditions. And impacts from the development on or to Epping Forest Special Area of Conservation is considered can be mitigated as part of the development specification or as financial contributions towards the management and monitoring of these issues at a strategic level. It is accepted that the public benefit of a new library does not principally stem from the actual design of this building, and that this benefit would likely be delivered as part of any redevelopment of the site, given the policy requirements in the site allocation. That said, overall, an assessment of the proposal has failed to identify any fundamental reason to suggest that the development is not sustainable and or well designed. It is therefore recommended that planning permission be granted, subject to conditions and the securement of financial contributions as detailed in section 8 of the report, with some slight amendments, picking up some typos within the addendum.
Tom, thank you very much for your presentation. And I call Mr. David Linnell on behalf of the Loughton Resident Association. So now we've got 3 minutes and I will give a prompt when there's 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the County Council is usually an excellent body. I know because a few years ago I was a Loughton County Councillor here myself. But I was very disappointed with this report and what we've just heard. On page 93, it states it's considered that there is a fine balance with this application in respect of delivering a project which is financially viable, but conversely a project which does not detrimentally impact or adversely change the area. Then on page 105, it admits that the proposals would result in a change to the character of the site, given the increased height of the new building, and that the public benefit of a new library does not principally stem from the actual design of this development, and that this benefit would likely be delivered as part of any redevelopment of this site. In other words, the County Council will have to build a new library or repair the existing building anyway, and the focus on financial viability in this report is wholly unjustified. I'll come back to that, but I need to mention the inevitable damage the development would cause to the Epping Forest Special Area of Conservation before the District Council gets round to providing any actual air pollution mitigation. You'll see in the corrections to the report that they don't have a strategy at the moment, only an interim one, which is just a list of things that they might get round to doing sometime. There's also the lack, as Mr. McCarthy said, of any specific comparison of the effect of demolishing and rebuilding as opposed to repairing the library on sustainability. Returning to my main point, the proposed building would be wholly out of character with its surroundings. Okay, it's listed in the local plan for redevelopment, but for only approximately 20 flats. This is doubling that number and going to 5 stories rather than the sunken 2 to 3. We've heard that the library lies at the higher end of a large, attractive open area, much used by residents, the War Memorial Green, the Edgeline Cricket Ground, the clubhouse, the Bowls Club, and the car park. Strangely, there are no visualisations from the Bowls Club, from Traps Hill itself at the front of the library.
30 seconds.
The existing roof line, the existing library roof line lies below the tops of the surrounding trees and its facade is relatively unobtrusive. This proposal would detrimentally impact and adversely change the area. It would clearly appear as an isolated 5-storey block of flats, a sore thumb towering way above the trees and above the open space, dominate the roadway. It's far too high and far too bulky and fundamentally breaches the provisions of the local plan. I urge you to reject this application, please.
Thank you, Ms. Linnell. And I call Ms. Emma Walker, who will speak on behalf of the applicant. So we'll get it up. You've got 3 minutes and then we'll give you a prompt. There's 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Emma Walker from Phase 2 Planning and Development, and I'm representing Essex County Council in their role as applicant for this planning application. As explained, the starting point for this application is the redevelopment of the existing library building and its re-provision as part of a scheme involving residential development established by the local plan. Although the adopted local plan suggests around 20 units, it does not set a maximum. National planning policies support making the best use of urban land in sustainable locations, and therefore it is entirely appropriate that this scheme aims to make the best use of the site, provided, of course, that the development is well designed and appropriate in its context. The appropriateness of the design is demonstrated by the support from Place Services Urban Design Officer. The minor concern raised in relation to the impact on the York Hill Conservation Area is at the lower end of less than substantial harm, and this would arise from virtually any scheme to redevelop the library site, given that the site is visible from the conservation area. The NPPF requires an assessment of such harm against public benefits. In this case, significant public benefits arise from the new library provision as recognised by the planning officer in his report. The existing building is now of an age and a condition where it needs substantial maintenance in order for it to continue to provide accommodation that is fit for purpose. Therefore, the configuration of the space over 2 floors is inefficient and difficult to manage and staff effectively. This scheme aims to deliver a library that is fit for the future, and the residential element enables that to happen. It is, of course, Essex County Council's intention to provide affordable housing as part of any residential development. However, the scheme has been independently appraised and it has been accepted that development cannot fund both the major benefit of the new library and also provide affordable housing. The proposals have been a long time in the evolution, subject to extensive pre-application discussions with both Essex County Council and Epping Forest District Council officers, which began in 2020. The scheme has evolved further since the application was submitted in September 2022 as a result of comments from consultees. Extensive discussions have also occurred with the occupants through this process, and all of the occupants who wish to continue operating from the site have been appropriately accommodated in the new scheme. We hope that members can support their officer by approving this high-quality scheme that will deliver much improved community infrastructure for the future of Loughton in a highly sustainable location.
Thank you very much indeed. I now call on Councillor Chris Pond as local member. Councillor Pond, given the amount of interest that this has generated, I will grant you an extra couple of minutes for your presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. I object to this application, which seeks to remove from Loughton, which is Essex's 8th largest town, a much appreciated facility. Virtually everyone in the town opposes this. I've been involved in local government in Loughton for 30 years and I've never known a more contentious application. It seeks to remove a good and commodious building and replace it with a smaller and less user-friendly library under 38 flats, which we can well do without in Loughton's town centre. Even this, I'm at a loss to know why the planning officers in the report stress so much the question of intensification of land use, where they don't seem to report much on paragraph 152 of the National Planning Policy Framework, which has been at the centre of discussions in the planning world in the last few months, which is the question of embedded carbon. The Secretary of State himself called in the proposal to demolish the Marks and Spencer shop in Oxford Street. And most part of the reasons for his refusing it was on carbon grounds. They make much of better utilisation of already developed land, but they don't mention very much the embodied carbon. Firstly, the building is much too high. What needs to be removed is the garage floor. The garage floor is only there as an aid to sell swanky flats. You are next to a 224 space public car park adjacent. 37 spaces could be leased from EFDC and paid for by the service charge of the occupants. Members, there must be a condition providing for the re-provision of a library in the town centre for the 2-year construction phase. There are several empty units in the town centre and ECC must rent one, so at least a small library is available. Opening Debden or Buckers Hill libraries for a couple of hours a week longer will not suffice. There needs to be a condition requiring the preservation and redisplay in any new building of the Loughton History Tapestry, which is 60 feet by 10 near the library entrance. This must be required. This is a work of art which was dealt with by the community 35 years ago. Is it just been now thrown into a skip? I'm surprised that's not there. You need also a condition directing construction traffic well away from the most sensitive parts of the special area of conservation. In all members, I urge you not to consent this application, at least in its present form. Firstly, the garage floor must be omitted to reduce the size and great bulk of the building. Conditions would be needed for the temporary re-provision in the town centre, as I've just mentioned, and lastly, the relocation and preservation of the collage. In short, I ask you to get the applicant to think again, first to retaining and upgrading the present fine building designed by the primary library architect of his time, and if a great monolith is still desired, to improve the conditions as I've stated. So in all, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your kindness on this, and I do urge you not to consent the building as is proposed at present. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pond. I will now ask Emma to read a statement that's been provided by Councillor Mark Durham, who's a cabinet member for Arts, Heritage and Culture, which includes libraries in his portfolio. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Chairman. He says, "Dear members, unfortunately, due to another commitment, I am unable to attend your meeting in person, but I have asked for a statement to be read on my behalf. As the new cabinet member responsible for the Essex Library Service, like my predecessors, I am keen to have the best county library service in the country. We've been investing in our estate recently and have delivered some excellent new and refurbished libraries that are proving to be very well supported by our residents. Loughton Library requires extensive and potentially very costly maintenance, but this work would still not deliver a facility that is suitable for the years ahead. A full redevelopment of the library would deliver a new, modern, high-quality public building that can be used for the local community. It would also be energy efficient and much more economical to operate. Our libraries need to offer much more diverse and flexible facilities. This design would provide a fully accessible, bright and modern library space, as well as the flexibility to enable a variety of other services that are not possible in the current building. This design would also give us a new outdoor learning and activity space with step seating that is linked directly to the library. As you are aware, this is a mixed-use development that adds a community space and high-quality residential units in a modern building. There has been extensive consultation locally and with Epping Forest District Council. The proposals for the library development have been enthusiastically supported by residents. Members, I respectfully request that you look favourably on this application, which will deliver a brand new modern library for Loughton, which will help the Essex Library Service continue its ambition to be the best in the country.
Thank you very much indeed, Emma. Tom, is there any comments you'd like to pass on the public speaking?
Just, I guess, maybe a few points on councillor Pond's suggestions. Construction traffic that is picked up within condition 15, construction management plan, that does require details to be submitted of routing of vehicles, which would allow us to consider any impacts resulting to Epping Forest SAC as a result of those. I understand that there is a commitment to provide a library during the construction phase, but at the moment, given that the planning permission hasn't been granted, they haven't explored contracts, so I don't know exactly where that will be. Potentially, we could have an informative seeking to require that to be within the locality of the area, or a desire for it to be within close proximity to the existing provision. And similarly with the tapestry, it's not something which I'm aware of, but again, encouragement could be made for that to be retained within any new library building.
Thank you. Councillor Steptoe.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. One of my points was around temporary libraries. I think that's been covered with your comments. With regards to the trees on site, there's one in particular in the picture. They are obviously remaining. What mitigation has been put in place to make sure that they're not damaged and given a problem on the trees?
Yep, so there will be 2 trees that will be removed. One is a category C tree, not the ones in the photo, and then there's a tree that's also died. It's just a stub at the moment, so that will be completely removed. In terms of protection measures, the oak tree is actually in a brick enclosure at the moment, so that will be removed, and then it will be appropriate arboricultural method statement to ensure that there is no harm to that. That tree, the oak tree, is incorporated within the courtyard area itself. So the courtyard has been designed around the tree, and the protection measures are therefore embedded within the construction of that courtyard itself.
So there won't be any invasion into the root ball of the tree itself?
So there might be, but that work will be done by hand, and it'll be done with people present on site to ensure that there is no long-term harm caused, and that as existing, it's not foreseen that there'll be any need to damage any existing of the root system.
If I may, Chairman, Councillor Pond mentioned there about parking with the possibility of removing the car parking from underneath the building and utilising the car park, the existing car park, which I assume is a town centre car park. What effect would that have on the use of the town car park? Overall, that could potentially have a possibility of causing problems with the traders within that area. Has any that been done on that point to understand whether that would be a feasible possibility?
I don't have any kind of assessment as to the parking take up in that car park. The application as proposed is put forward a standalone private provision, so they haven't looked at the existing take up within the existing car park.
Thank you. Chairman, on that basis, I'd be quite happy to propose we approve this.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Councillor McGarren.
Yeah, I myself in a slightly odd position here, I have to say, because I would have thought before reading more papers, I would be wholeheartedly supporting a recommendation for a new purpose-built library, a much-needed accommodation. But our job is to question, so I'm going to question some of the issues around it. And it's hardly been referred to thus far, but one of my main issues is the issue of affordability and the fact that there's no affordable accommodation provided here in what's quite a sizable development. That worries me greatly, and I don't like to set precedents like that, to be honest with you. I've got a few questions, but can I start with one specific one? So on page 83 of the papers, it says careful consideration was given as to whether to invest a significant sum of money into refurbishment work. Councillor Durham, the cabinet member, referred to extensive and very costly work required. I haven't seen anywhere in here a figure for what that refurbishment work would cost. I feel a little uncomfortable with that because we've been presented with figures of the deficit. Well, if we were staring down the barrel of extensive refurbishment, which we're now not having to do because we're doing something else, surely that figure should be incorporated. So my question was, what was the approximate figures for refurbishment costs, and are they included in the figures we've been given in terms of the deficit? Sorry, just going on from that, if this goes ahead, we'll have a new library, which will be a capital asset. Similarly, as a financial figure for that been estimated, and has that been included in the financial estimate? I'll leave it there for now, but I do have other questions largely around the finances.
We'll take that one first then, Tom.
Yep. So we was not presented with any financials in terms of the refurbishment of the building. We was presented a viability assessment which sought to assess the viability of demolition and reconstruction. So the financials purely look at demolishing the building and then the construction program associated with redeveloping the site. We was not presented with any financials relating to refurbishing or modernising the existing building. The application is obviously an application to demolish. The evidence base which was submitted in support of that decision did not include any financial calculations with regard to refurbishment.
Thank you for your honesty. I find that extraordinary, I have to say. I find that absolutely extraordinary. And I know the main issue around planning is not financial decisions. So when we're talking, but to be fair, Chair, when we're talking about affordability and there's no affordable accommodation provided because it's not financially sustainable, we have to have the full picture of the finances in order to make a decision on whether that is financially sustainable or not. And we haven't got that here, because clearly what's being said is if we don't go with this plan, there will have to be significant refurbishment at some point, and there's no costing on that.
Okay.
That bothers me.
Can I move to the next question?
Yes, thank you. So in terms of the, again, it's to do with finance, a developer's profit margin was described as 3.3 million. Now, I'm not a developer, I'm not an expert. First off, I should say, I've got no problem with property developers. They exist to create a profit which creates jobs and prosperity. That's fine. So I'm not quibbling about the right to turn a profit. However, the only reference to that 3.3 million in terms of how it compared, how it broke down was from the Epping Forest District Council's objection, which said the developer profit on the private side of it was 17.5% and on the commercial side was 15%. Now, again, I don't claim to be an expert, but that doesn't sound low to me. And when we're talking about the cost to the council, I think we need to have some comparisons as to other developments and normal profitability levels, because we haven't got that in here, and I think it should be included in there. On a couple of other questions, and I'll be as quick as I can, Chair. On page 103, it says the independent review largely ratified the conclusions, but came out with a 4.9 million shortfall as opposed to 5.1 million shortfall. Again, I'd like to have seen that independent review in the papers so we could make a judgment on how largely it did or didn't agree with the council's position on the matter. On page 104, again, I don't think it's been mentioned so far, no education contributions have been sought from Essex County Council, or the contribution has been sought by the NHS. I find that inconsistent personally. Clearly, this development will have some, albeit relatively minor, impact on education in the area, and therefore I find it bizarre that there's no educational contribution. And finally, on page 120, it says, there's a question, will a temporary library be provided during construction? And the answer is yes, although the exact location of this is still to be secured by the applicant. Again, that worries me. I've got an issue in my own division at the moment about potential closure of library and temporary facilities. So this isn't my division, I hasten to add, but it does worry me that the applicant is saying they can't yet give us the exact location. Before we go ahead with this, as a committee, I'd want to have more undertakings. There will be an appropriate temporary location that is suitable and in the right area. And at the moment, according to these papers, we haven't got that. Anyway, sorry, I'm taking up another.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McGann. There's 4 questions there, Tom. Have you made it?
I think I've got the 4, yeah. So in terms of the 15 and the 17.5% profit margins, the viability assessment is effectively a theoretical assessment based on baseline standards for other developments. The independent consultant that we used said that the profit ranges normally between 15 and 20%. So that was why the 15 and 17.5% was largely accepted as part of that assessment. The independent review we had of the viability is available on our website. It is in the public domain. So if you did want to look at the financials, that is on our website. Largely was.
And I will have a look, but it would, I do think it would have been helpful to have been presented to us today.
The term largely was used because it was minor differences in terms of calculations, in terms of build costs, fit out costs, which resulted in the change in overall deficit. In terms of contributions towards education and the NHS, those contributions are, the report has put forward the consultation responses of which we have received back. So our infrastructure delivery team have advised that no education contribution is required in this instance in context of the locality and the predicted educational demand that the development put forward, whereas the NHS have come back and requested a financial contribution. It would be unreasonable for me to pluck a figure out of the air to say contribute that towards education when the department funding those projects hasn't collated that or given me that evidence base.
Temporary library was the last one. Temporary
library, as I think I suggested earlier, there is a commitment to do it. It's just that they haven't.
Commitment to do lots of
but yeah, there is the potential for, I think, probably an informative rather than a condition which would seek to outline members' desire for that provision to be within a building within very close proximity to the existing, rather than it being increased hours at a nearby library.
I'll come back to really quickly.
Very quickly, yeah.
Thank you. A number of issues there. Thank you for the answers. So, 2 big issues I've got is that I don't think you can talk about considerable financial costs of refurbishment that will be needed and then not include them in the figures we've got. We're making a decision where we've not got all the information, and also I'm very concerned about the vague status of the temporary library provision. So much as I'd like to support this measure, in its present form, I can't support it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been looking over the application and I've been listening to the points on the objections. Looking at the design of the building and the actual area, I don't consider 5 stories to be particularly high. It's actually probably at the lower end of medium, I would argue. And looking at the surrounding areas, I can see on the high street, there's already 4-story buildings. So it's only a building that's only 1 story higher than the buildings in the surrounding area anyway. It looks like it's in quite a sustainable location. There's good transport links. It's near the train station. It's right near the high street. People probably wouldn't have much use for cars in this sort of development, and it probably attract people who don't want to drive and are commuters and want to live in a central location. In terms of its local environmental impact, you can see the provision of solar panels. It's a modern building. I imagine it's going to be well insulated. So in fact, it may actually have a good impact on the environment in terms of sustainable policies. It's got cycling provision. Therefore, I'm minded to support this, and I would like to second the application, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mackenzie. There weren't any questions there. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you. Just trying to, and I'm sure I'm right, financial side of the development and the application has got nothing to do with the planning committee.
Correct.
That's what it's to do with affordability. It is.
Please don't
Councillor
interrupt.
McCarron, please.
Just say it.
It's for the applicant to do the affordability. And we have a viability assessment, and that we've had an independent viability assessment. The question of 15, I think Tom, the councillor, Tom, this is just figures they use in that viability assessment as to the normal profit margin. It's not something that's specific to this site. It's normal. But the main thing is we're here to deal on a planning matters, not on financial matters. That's up to Councillor Durham, who put it in. But I just go back to reality now, or not reality, so I'm sorry about that word. It is an iconic and landmark building, I think. It's not beautiful, it's not pretty, but it's what we get today is square buildings, and I think it will be a landmark building. The question of on the local plan, we all deal with local plans, and they're indicative, the numbers that we're going to put on there initially, and then it's up to what we could do as we develop it. So it's a minimum, but it's not a maximum. Just one main question I've got here is the land learning area. Is that available to the people in the flats? Because there's no amenity area as such. Okay, you've got the forest all the way around, but you know, if the kids want to go out and play, if there's children in the building, is that open for them?
So the courtyard area is proposed as a mixed use area, so it'll be for the library and the residential units and the public alike. There is a condition seeking to require a management plan of this, as it was put forward as a significant outdoor learning resource for the library. So expected that management plan may seek to sort of allow areas to be ring fenced for certain parts of the day for the library service, but in general, it would be a mixed use area which would be open to any and all to use.
Yeah, just one more.
Yeah, quick one. Yeah.
Obviously, Councillor Pond brought up the question of doing away with the basement, and I think in your report you talked about the car park, the local car park, but there's only 24 spaces there.
No, the public car park is significantly larger. I think Councillor Pond said it was 240.
Oh, it's a big car park, is it? I'm sorry, I heard the figure 24. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fellegant.
Thank you, Chair. One procedural point, actually, just it's been moved and seconded, but we still haven't finished the debate. And so
Okay.
At Braintree, we were trying to get away from doing that when we're
not in Braintree.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just sort of pointing that out. It just seems to be an odd thing to do. Okay.
So no rule stopping that.
Okay, fine. I've just got a few concerns with the report and what's come up in the agenda as well. One of the design of it, I don't like the design of it. I think it's quite an ugly looking building, very monolithic, looks sort of like the sort of 70s school buildings we're trying to get away from these days. I'm concerned about the 5 stories being in that area, although I'm a bit torn on that because I think population density, we are going to have to look to increase it, especially closer to London, obviously. I am concerned about the lack of social housing. I get it that they're providing a library, so there is the sort of community benefit there. But I do think even if it was 5-10%, some of it could be social housing. I'm also concerned about the parking. There's almost 1 space per apartment, not quite. And if you get younger couples, I mean, I don't know if they're trying to aim for older people, but I imagine there'd be a mixed residential use. So, I think on average you're getting 1.7 cars per home these days. So I imagine it will have a knock-on effect on local roads and perhaps the car park that's in the vicinity. I was also concerned about the temporary library not being figured out where that's going to go. Also, finally, in agreement with Councillor McGowan about the lack of the costs for refurbishment. In the draft waste plan that we've got going out at the moment, it says we should mend and repair as much as we can to reduce the carbon footprint. Now, this is a big mend and repair possibility. And I just think that we should know how much it was going to cost. I mean, I'm not sure if Essex has got the budget to build a new library or to refurbish it, but I think we should know the cost And is it possible to move that we postpone a decision? Can I do that?
There is already
Right,
proposal is taken on the table.
right.
So if that falls, then we'll go to that.
So how do I propose that we postpone it to get that?
It's too late because it's been moved and seconded.
This is what I mean about like, we go too early on a decision.
That's the rules that they are. Yeah.
Okay.
Colin, do you want
Can't you move an amendment? Can't we move an
to?
amendment?
You can't. No. So do you want to pick up the thing about the sign?
I would then to say, there's no objection coming from urban design consultants, place services, and the design itself in terms of Epping Forest District Council's consultation response. There hasn't been any sort of fundamental concerns with the design per se. It's purely been on sort of the scale and mass of the building itself rather than its architectural qualities.
There weren't any other questions. There was just many comments on it.
Can I just come in on the point about the viability in the fact that the decision as to whether the library was referred or a new planning application came forward was a decision for library services to make. So we can only assess the planning application that's been brought. We're not comparing sort of another development with 20 flats or something. We've only got the application before us. The viability assessment was done on the basis of the cost of this scheme, and it came out that the profit margin, there was still going to be a deficit and therefore affordable housing couldn't be required. So I think we do need to make sure that we're separating that it's a decision on this application, not what something else might have come forward.
Thank you, Claire, for that.
What affects Steele then?
Councillor Steele, next.
Thank you. Yeah, it seems to me that this is like an exercise, a financial exercise in how to get a free library by building some flats and kind of squeeze, and you need 38 flats to make it viable to then build a library and so on. But the thing about the education contribution does worry me. I mean, I understand the affordable housing aspect in as much as, well, they're building a library anyway. But I kind of expected some sort of explanation on the education contribution, and I'm not sure if I did hear it or not, that some sort of explanation that there is plenty of spare spaces in the locality or something like that. Therefore, there's no need to have a contribution towards education. I don't know whether that no one gives you a buy, or whether that set the precedence that if there's plenty of school places when you build a big estate, then you don't have to bother making an education contribution. So that does slightly worry me. But my final question was 38 flats, 37 car parking spaces. Couldn't you have squeezed another one in? I mean, it just seems you're one off the actual minimum criteria. Why make a decision that one doesn't have a car parking space?
I think the education, you really touched on the fact that the infrastructure delivery team has not requested any contribution, and as such, you cannot force the applicant to do that. Do you want to comment on the car park?
I was just actually reading the actual consultation response from our infrastructure colleagues, and it's, I can advise that the development of this size can be expected to generate the need of up to 1.44 early years and childcare places, 4.8 primary school places and 3.2 secondary school spaces. However, a contribution towards early years childcare is not required at this time. A contribution towards primary education is not required at this time, and a contribution towards secondary education is not required at this time. So
it's a statement of fact, isn't it, rather than a reason? But we haven't got a reason.
And in terms of the car parking provision, I believe that the space was lost because of the need to house the sprinkler tank in the basement. So that was the reason that one of the spaces got omitted from the plan.
You couldn't squeeze.
I obviously, it
just seems bizarre that one poor owner is going to not have a parking space.
It's Councillor Hardway, you next.
Thank you. I'm a great believer in these days of scarce land and trying to protect the green belt, that we make the maximum use of the buildings we have, I suppose. And this is a good demonstration of a multi-use building, squeezing in lots of community use. But there is a a line where intensifying the use oversteps the mark and becomes overdevelopment. And I think that this one is very close to that, although I don't think it has quite breached it. I was a little puzzled with the car park. I mean, all regeneration projects tend not to be viable, tend not to provide any affordable. I mean, if you look in Harlow town centre, most of the projects that come forward make no contributions to anything whatsoever because they're not viable. But this one, putting a car park on the ground floor adds an enormous cost to the building. So if it hadn't been included, there might have been some provision for affordable housing. But looking back at the notes, I see that it's it's on the side of a hill, in effect, on a slope. And there's not much you can do with an underground bit of half of the building. And usually the best thing to use it for is for a car park. So I can understand why they've done it, and that pushes it up to the 5 stories. So on balance, I am concerned that it might be broaching just about the overdevelopment line, but I think I will support this in its current form. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adwell. I don't think there was any questions there.
No questions.
Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Chairman. It just concerns me that members are getting far too involved in this. Our remit is a development and regulation committee, and our remit is to approve or not approve planning applications. It's not for us to get involved in the finances of any application. We wouldn't do this if this was a private developer. So it's just not within the remit of this committee. I share the concerns what the councillors are saying, but it's not for us to get involved in that. We have to look at the planning application, and that's what we should be doing. Thank you. I think this does fit in with Essex. The cabinet members spoken about it. It does fit in with the future library strategy. Concerns me very much that the local member is saying these are swanky flats, we don't need them. His idea of a swanky flat and my idea of a swanky flat is certainly not the same. I think this is the best use of the site, and it's a library fit for the future. And if members care to look at Braintree Library was built, and there was a lot of concerns when that was built because it was built right next to a listed building. And there was all sorts of concerns, but actually nobody even takes any notice of it now, and it fits really well in with the surrounding area. So I'm happy to support this application, Jim.
Thank you very much indeed. I have no further speaker. Councillor Gardner.
I'm just going to say a second.
It's already been done.
It's already been done, is it?
Sorry, Chairman, just before we close, I just want to, it's been brought to my attention that I think the report may be referring to a slightly older version of the Essex Future Library Strategies. The one referenced in the report is 2019 to 2024. I think there was one that was adopted.
Fresh one.
2022 to 2026. I have been looking through that document, and I don't think in any way the position of the strategy is changed as part of that update. However, I don't believe the quote within the report is replicated in the new version of the document. However, the principle of what Essex Libraries are aiming to achieve is exactly the same within that refresh document. So I apologise for that.
Well, maybe on that basis, if the proposal and seconder are happy to update the particular reference to the strategy, I will then go to vote, including the minor type on the get that addendum.
Yeah.
All those in favour? Appreciate it. And those against? Any abstentions?
Chairman, that's been carried.
Hasn't been approved. Thank you very much indeed, members, for your contributions. We'll go to agenda item 7, which is enforcement. 7.1, there's a report on RAC following receipt of directive from ULAC. This is in the hands of Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Not done a presentation on this one, but firstly, I just wanted to confirm that there is an error in the title of the report. As I'm sure members will be aware, this should read reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, not autoclaves. I sincerely apologise for any confusion that has caused. Turning to the report, this seeks to provide members with a short update on planning guidance which have been issued by the government in respect of adopting a pragmatic approach to finding solutions and minimising disruption to education where RAC has been identified at a site. Without seeking to discuss exact figures, as I'm sure members can appreciate, this is a slightly evolving situation. RAC has been identified at a number of schools across Essex. This report is not seeking to provide an update on the current position in Essex and/or outline any specific measures being taken at any one school. However, the report is seeking members' approval for the County Planning Authority to adopt a pragmatic approach to any potential breach of planning control as a result of the installation of a temporary building or any temporary provision without planning permission by Essex County Council as a direct or indirect response to a RAC issue. The recommendation that has been made in consideration of the Council's adopted local enforcement and site monitoring plan, but also the aforementioned guidance issued by the government, which is included in the appendix to the report before you. In addition to this, the recommendation is also caveated with that any necessary retrospective regulation application is promptly submitted to the Council for consideration.
Thank you, Tom. The recommendation is on page 128 and the letter was appended on page 129. Can I have a proposer for that? Second that? Thank you very much. All those in favour, please show. It's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, members. 7.2, it's land south of Ivy Barn Lane in Margareting. Tom, that's in your hands again, I believe.
It is, yeah. I've got a short presentation on this one. Okay, so this information concerns land to the south of Ivy Barn Lane in Margareting in Gatestone. The site comprises approximately 0.6 hectares of greenbelt land, which is bound to the east by the A12 junction 14 off slip. To the north of the site, on the other side of Ivy Barn Lane, is an events venue, with the nearest residential property being Ivy Barn Cottage, which is directly adjacent and was granted planning permission by Chelmsford City Council in 2019. In August of this year, the Waste Planning Authority were made aware that potentially material was being imported and deposited on the land in question. The site was subsequently visited by officers and it was confirmed that waste materials had been imported and deposited across the site, significantly raising the level of the landing places. To give members an idea of the site and what we was looking at, this was looking south along the eastern boundary of the site, so the tree line is representing the buffer between the site and the A12 off slip. A closer photo along that boundary showing the extent of land raising which has resulted from the importation. Again, along that eastern boundary, but this time looking north, so towards the corner, the junction with Ivy Barn Lane. This is taken looking east from the south of the site, and then similarly looking east from the south of the site, but looking towards the field boundary, again showing the extent of importation which we are dealing with. And then finally, just for in terms of the type of the material which has been imported, the photo shows this is a mixed product with various waste streams confined within it. Following identification of the breach of planning control, officers did engage with the landowner and initially afforded some time for him to rectify the situation. This informal period, however, passed without any of the material waste being removed from the site. In view of the ongoing harm being caused to the environment, local residential amenity and the character and appearance of the area, the Waste Planning Authority considered it expedient to pursue a formal enforcement notice. And a notice was served on the 27th of September. The notice will take effect on the 3rd of November. An appeal is made beforehand. The notice requires the landowner to cease and not to resume any further importation, depositation, storage and/or spreading of waste materials within 3 months to remove from the land all of the waste material is imported, and then within 4 months to restore the land to its former condition. Officers will continue to monitor the site in relation to the enforcement notice served, reporting back to members with further updates either as part of a quarterly update or as a standalone update as considered necessary and appropriate in due course.
Tom, thank you very much. There's no recommendation there. Report is for noting, and that is in Councillor Grundy's division. And he did ask if you had to.
Chairman, I totally support the recommendation action proposed by the planning officer.
Thank you very much indeed. And as you confirmed, that will be reported back in the update. Agenda item 7.3, we have 19 cases of enforcement update. If any questions relating to that, please take and direct with Sean Long, who's not here today. Agenda item 8, we have 2 lots of stats as we missed a meeting last month. Enforcement cases are decreased to 20 but increased to 22. They've still come out nowhere. And again, that's for noting. Agenda item 9, date of next meeting is on 24th of November. 9 and 10, urgent business and exempt urgent business are none. Members, I thank you very much indeed for your participation, and apologies for the voices about to give up as ghost. Thank you very much indeed. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Let's see here.
Please.